Hello, my people. Welcome to part 3 of Truth Spells. Today, let us look at the Christian God spell, or at least to begin. Why must there be a God spell, and what is the purpose? A God spell will unseat, influence, or confuse God in man and give the power to the esoteric at the hands of ulterior forces. It will transfer the authority from self as God internal, man divine, to external demigods. There is the truth about the crucifixion and who is being crucified. Self is being crucified. Free will is being crucified. The critical mind is being crucified. And you shall possess no autonomous will to be. Someone else will dictate to you. You will depend on predefinitions, books, scientists, religions, and societal authorities. You will have only a right to take prescriptions in the name of the leader knows best, the preacher knows best, or science knows best. Just follow the science. You will lose autonomy, but oh so consistently, step by step until you have no soul left. You will have surrendered all. One use of the Christian God spell is that it is a subliminal voice from the oppressive enslavers to the most enslaved race, which obviously is the black race. Of course, all the races are slaves and zombies just as much as the black race, but it is more conspicuously brutal against the original inhabitants. Slave makers are driven by outside entities and have nothing to do with any particular race. They merely create the virtual reality and a mindset and belief system to support. Each race will see itself as being different, but being in a competition with the other. There is division, divide and rule. Each sex will see themselves as different, but in a competition with the other. There is division, divide and rule. The wisdom of all integrities will be split into confused parts and spread across cultic clans that each become adverse to the other, and there is division, that to divide and rule. There is no one vice. There can never be one vice. The divisions all live with a sense of injustice. The wife is taught that the husband is wrong. She lives with a sense of injustice. She lives to seek justice against her male counterpart, against herself, but she will not even realize it. There is no sense of oneness in the oneness of the all. There is competition, one adverse to the other. There is polarization. One will only despise the other. It has nothing to do with race. The divisions are included among the races. The defining words that are potent to any true balance are broken down into war tones, like the word violence, for example. The word violence relates to no gender. But violence against women is a term that polarizes. It is a complete lie, but it puts a mediocre spell of competition, of divisiveness, of enmity, and hate to the mindset of the human against the human. The faculty is turned against itself, pointing to an illusionary and hateful competition that is actually a part of itself. Please understand this thing, for it is very important. Violence is violence. There are violent and non-violent people. Sometimes even good people err to violence. Violence has no sex. There is no penis or vagina. Please come on and let you break the spell. Those that you blame are the victims, same as you, who are cultivated and zombified to predefined and adverse outcomes, same as you. If it seems that an adverse thing typically happens to the male gender and it is violent and unjust. It is not violence against male. It is just violence. Find what causes it. What causes it will not be because of the nature of females, but it could very well be a cultivated mindset. Heal yourself, for those that want you divided will not heal you. I want to give you an example, and this example defines the same illusion of enmity between the races and cult groups as well. While the black man was a shackled slave, there were decisions made, and now the black woman is blaming the black man for decisions that men made. Use this as a template to see what is going on. This is always an illusion, the same spell at every point of division, race, culture, or sex. It does not matter. Here I go off on another tangent because I want to bring you clearer to understanding what is going on. However, I have to leave this point for now, hoping that it is enough to give you an insight. At another time, we will go into details about these spells of polarization so that you will put your finger on it. Just remember that there is no such thing as violence against women. There is only violence. There are two types of people, two types of gods. In the perilous dark ages, the sociopath appears with his mind set to usurp the golden throne. The darkness will cover the ages until the seasons change. The old gods will be replaced by the new ones, and these new gods will be the returning empaths and creators of the golden age. It takes the experience of all the ages to bring a soul to full circle. The one that overcomes finds peace and will no longer be disturbed by the turmoils of perpetual motion. He will need not repeat the cycles, neither large or small ones, as many have done, but only by their own choice. Before slavery was abolished in the New World, the slave makers ordered that the enslaved would first have to convert to Christianity. Why was it so? It was to kill the critical mind in them and replace it with prescribed and enforced spells of mediocrity to induce the subjective slave mindset to the builder, whom they will possess as a labor force, but this time in a subtle way and by virtual reality. Remember that a slave is in the head. No one is a slave until he accepts a mediocre mindset. A person can be tied with any form of shackle, but he will not be a slave until he accepts a mediocre mindset. You will live in a world where shackled slaves walk alongside you and all you see are free men. The driving force of any human being is the power of internal God. As long as he does not turn away from his God, he is his own power. The God spell was to use sorcery to substitute his internal power, to prescribe adverse truths to him, to create the subject mind that is a slave. It was to make them dependent for definitions and then to define to them who they are and that they are inferior servants to God. For now, without God internal, a God can be handed to them. A man with internal God in him can never be a slave. He will forever see himself as only a prisoner. A slave has to be subject in the mind. Therefore, a man with God in him will always be fighting for freedom. You cannot ask him to hold your musket until you return from a lunch break. You would be fucked for doing so. And in that time, the tables were threatening to turn, for the resistances were far more potent than history will admit. The God spell was a long-term and short-term design. Some would not be taken in the first phase, but as the culture continued, their posterity would know no other culture and have no other definition but being subject to the white god. The fact that the white man is always used as the front man makes him believe that he is in fact the slave master. Let me give you an example of deception. Queen Elizabeth descended from a jet black shone of jet black men, and she would not be there if she was no bloodline of it. In order to fill a person with a God spell, you must find ways to cause him to empty his vessel. Then you can fill it with what spirit you like. You fill it with a ghost or a cult demon, the Holy Ghost spell. But to make sure this input God will bear your fruit, you must make this God in your image and with your own mindset. Then you will control that slave from without by his commitment to this God. In fact, he will control himself with zealous fortitude. Now, not only will you be able to hand him a musket and take a break, you will be able to order him to shoot his own children if they disrespected you. He will do it for God. God as the image of you. No other way will make the enemy surrender willingly to serve and worship you. They were sheep owned by the master. They were not like unto the master, neither by blood nor by race, and they had to surrender, bow, and berate themselves to experience any kind of joy in life. This is the idea they were sold by active and subliminal means, but they had to they had to accept because God said so and not the oppressor. They had to show love to the oppressor because God loved the oppressor more, and that God came in the image of the oppressor. Therefore, the oppressor was the child of God. The image of greatness and the slaves were the devils that could not level up. They were given trauma to berate themselves with and called by the meaning bywords to make them know their positions in life. They were niggers and all other bywords. They took the bait because they turned away from God internal that makes man divine. I keep telling you that all world power is taken with words and spelling and not with guns and explosives. Sorcery, spells and curses. It happened when the condition of slave plantations were no longer conducive for even white people to grow their children in. It had to stop at some point. History will not express that if they had not found a way to create a virtual reality, the slaves would think, I mean, a virtual reality would make the slave think he is free. So if they did not find a way to create that reality, the tables would have turned by violent force. In other words, what history will not tell you is that the slaves would violently force their way on top. And remember, I mean, it could be different in some countries like America, but where slave plantations, like in the Caribbean places like this, the slaves were gonna force their way on top. And in America, there would be a seriously violent war. It does not matter what the historians will tell you. And remember this: these enslaved masses, especially in countries like the US, were the brains that drove technology from behind the scenes. So this is the kind of power they would be fighting. Stop believing in the superficial and look for the truth. I am going to repeat this because it probably even sound impossible. It's just like this guardian who is, involved with NEPA. You will never hear anything about it. So look, not with NEPA, with NASA, right? It's NASA, right? I'm going to repeat, especially in countries like the US, right? The slave masses were the brains that drove technology. From behind the scenes, they were the inventors. They were the creators of the Industrial Revolution and all this science that you see around you. They were the fathers of it. History will not explain that they were not all simply put in a field to plant cotton. They were the great scientists and the inventors that invented the things that white folks patented. They were housed in buildings where all they did was invent. The enslavers would take these inventions and lay claim to them. This was the kind of force that they were dealing with, and so they had to find a way to make the slave feel free. There were many fortresses broken down by the captives, many soldiers disarmed and pulverized, and the rebellions would only get stronger. Haiti drove out the French, and the other islands would soon follow, for it was obviously on the horizon, especially in countries like Jamaica. Imagine a country like Jamaica. Just imagine. I mean, don't think about history now. Don't think about anything. Just imagine a country like Jamaica with a few white folks walking around with guns and claiming that they rule. Just imagine what would happen. History will not tell the truth. History will not tell the truth. The enslavers made compromises in fear while pretending as if it was for peace and justice and that they still held the ultimate power. It was not true, but the slaves did not even know. Had this continued, the world would have a different appearance from what it is today. The tables were turning and the enslavers were proactive. They were the ones with the intel. So this is what they manipulated using the spiritual realm to keep power. But if the fight remained upon the physical realm, they would have lasted two times over. Now they rule the islands by treasonous black representatives that agree to secret principles that do not benefit the people they promise to serve. The acts of Caribbean governments are treasonous, and these acts, these sociopathic, cultic demons carry out knowingly. They are house slaves. Ask why a country in the sun, say like Jamaica, must spend so much for fossil fuel electricity when solar panels could be made into common use by the government. Ask your government why this was never attempted. Ask your government why the one person who suggested it, who became prime minister, got dudused. Listen to the absurdity of an answer. The answer will mostly come as an enforcement of the idea of dependency. Even with something as basic as solar panels, the black people were great scientists hidden behind the curtains in slavery. If you live in a black society, your government is deliberately a traitor. There is no possible justification outside of this. There are no two ways to it. There is no if, no but, or because. This is a fact. This is something that no one can challenge. I mean, if this video goes viral that every single house in the world watches it, there will be no one to stand and say this that I am telling you is not true. It is impossible. You, the children of the enslaved in the Caribbean, for example, are deliberately held as slaves to toil and pay the offshore oil companies. You are deliberately claimed as human souls owned by others, and facilitated by your own so-called brothers in government who knowingly work for the enslavers. This is another thing that I am telling you that cannot be denounced. I have to tell you this to bring you to clarity. It is not even about a controversy, it's just that I have to tell you because it is a part of the duty that I have in me, and I'm not going to be a traitor. I am going to do my work. So where the argument must be, I mean, brought up, I'm going to speak the words, and then it's done. If you bring a financial resource, if you bring a financial resource to a country like, okay, if you bring financial resources to a country like Nigeria and declare that, oh, I hate the word Nigeria, I hate the word Nigeria. Those are some of the most intelligent people in the world. I don't care if they went to school. If you bring financial resources to a country like Nigeria and declare that you want something you imagined, anything be invented, and that you will pay the inventor handsomely, and you want the prototype in 6 months, someone will bring it in 3. This is the gift of the black race, and that is why they are the threat to demigods. I do not care what you wish to invent. The inventor might be a little boy who never went to school, but then this is not even a race argument. I was talking about problems affecting the race, the very hardest hit. Again, I remind you that I am not in the business of flaunting conspiracy theories, but whatever affects the points that I reveal to you will have to be mentioned. If you are politically oriented and you had so much love for this or any politician in your government, I am telling you because it is my duty that he is a black sociopathic back and belly rat who knows that he is selling you out. This is the truth. Because these things are only mentioned where they affect my point, I will leave it at that. It is also my responsibility to explain the seemingly impossible truth that the system of slavery is not about race. It is about business, and business has a structure. It's the business of sociopathic demon demigods. It is a alien species, but not in the way you think about alien. The white race was simply used as utility, like house slaves, and this position they still hold to that degree. It has nothing to do with them being included as children of any world governing order. However, by the swing of the pendulum, and in the age of Aquarius, they have been cultivated by failing energies. They came out the worst for wears at the end of the last 500 years. Not everything you can see with your naked eyes, so come back to perceiving the energies. Your wealth is in your person, and from that within will your reward be manifested. Had this system of slavery have to do with race, their fathers who understand the cosmic would have protected their energies. Observe and see what they have been cultivated to be. Nowhere in the universe does this succeed to be rewarding. This is another secret I would love to explain, but time is a factor. How much can I say in 1,000 years? But we only have a few here, right? Only by a God spell could the enemy be taught to serve his oppressor as God. Only by a God spell could the enemy be taught to serve his oppressor as God. Only by a spell of induced mediocrity could a slave be taught to love his master more than himself, and a woman vow to marry her rapist and bow to his testaments, his holy testaments. See, we must have our God, and if it is removed from within you, you will find a substitute. There is no possible way to serve a God outside of you without it being idolatry. There is no possible way to serve a God outside of you without committing idolatry. In fact, there is no possible way to justify telling someone that God is out there or up there without committing a deadly sin against God and the universe. If God tells you something, it is for your own good. He will also tell the other person what is good for him as well. Why do you deliver to him a message from God when God is in him? It is for the reason of holding him to a Holy Ghost demon spell. If you expect progress or prosperity from a government in a black country, you will receive gridlock, for that is the utter truth. But this evil leader will not come back to tell you that they are blocking your passage or that the outside forces are interfering. Instead, he will try to confuse you about technicalities. How many times have you heard these words? For he will not betray his God who insists on shackling you. He will tell you that the problem is red tapes, which he promises to remove. But 30 years later, he will repeat the same words. But he will say that these red tapes remain the law to obey, and you do not hold him to account for treason. Your government commits treason all day, every day. For this is a confession to treason, especially since you did not make these suppressive laws. He is the government, and you employed him to avoid them. Then he says that these laws were always on the books, but you do not see that it is another confession to treason. Him saying that these laws were always on the book, even before the last 30 years when he first said that he will remove them, is another confession to treason. What is his job as government? Who does he work for as government? Whose law does he protect? My advice to you would be to let those that choose to be slave maker puppets on false claims that it will serve you know what you demand of them. Stop asking and start telling them what you pay them to do. Make sure they obey you in your own country. The more they allow mercenaries to enter and exploit you, the happier house slaves they become, and their hearts hold no love but only contempt for you, because contempt for you bring prosperity to them, because sociopathy is the qualification for leadership roles. They have no shame. You have to manage them instead of trying to appeal to their consciences. Manage them because you are sovereign. If you did not confuse science for magic, you could not be superstitious. Superstition is to believe in a supernatural force too high for even science to decipher. This power will only be understood and interpreted by select definers, and you must depend on them for defining the questions surrounding the issue. Religion also means the same thing, but this superstition in particular must surround a God spell. Christianity simply means a kind of superstition that supports a God spell, or a kind of superstition in the form of a God spell. Why did the slave makers force the enslaved to accept Christianity before being free? It was to cause the black masses to subject and bow to the image of a white lord. It was to be executed by subliminal inductions, physical trauma, and DNA memory rituals. Two reasons why the white race received this role is firstly that they were more of a minority in numbers, just like the situation in Nigeria. Oh, I hate that word. We're a minority Fulani group. not even related by blood, is used to plunder the masses on behalf of Britain. Secondly, the white race seems utterly zealous to perform the works of these demigods, especially when given a false sense of inclusion, where it appears as if all these great conquests are being done on their behalf. Does the black race believe that Barack Obama was on their side, is on their side? Why should they? And why should the white race believe that the evil is on their side? I want to say something about this issue, but you have a confused and scary understanding about what are alien and extraterrestrial forces, so I must wait a bit more. Let us look at how powerful a God spell can get into the person and manifest as God in that person. We who have understanding will use the secrets of perpetual motion to create by way of high science that appear as sorcery or witchcraft. Religion is a confused interpretation of divine sciences. When you see something appear as magic, it is because you do not see the natural reality manifesting in it. This will bring you to superstition. Religion is a kind of superstition in the form of a God spell. Here is a natural God spell by way of nature. The ancient ritualized a spell word inside of his DNA. It is done in a simple way, like as you twist a nail and it turns into the appearance of a screw. All experiences, including trauma, will become uh, a permanent record in the person's DNA. I want you to get this. All your experiences, including your trauma, will become a permanent record in your DNA. For without that memory, nothing will evolve or advance. Your DNA has to keep the memory so that you can advance. So the wizard who was getting old would long for a future Messiah to complete his hard and laborious task of teaching the integrities to humankind. But no, he was the only one, and his physical vessel was soon to put down for rest in the near future. He brought music to the ritual, he brought those based on the culture, and words often repeated that were repeated for hundreds of years, and because of culture, they would repeat for another 10,000 or at least, if the culture does not break. That was the hope in design. He brought the rhymes and puzzles that were always spoken, and he brought the wisdom of the cosmic and the events in perpetual motion. He knew the secret of the passages of the celestial residents and the way they moved around space, going and returning in their marked spaces of time. He knew the spells and the periods of their circuits. By this wisdom, by music, by the drums, by words and rhymes often repeated, he twisted and farmed all his memories to save to his own DNA chip. He repeated the mantras, cementing the themes, and he repeated the mantras and cemented the themes in concrete again. He created this wonderful file and filed within his DNA. He ordered those things in their culture that would be often repeated and placed them in the memory store in that file as triggers of awakening in the future. He attached these prefixes to the cosmic, to perpetual motion, and set the timer upon the return of a certain comet. He set the timer upon the return of a certain comet that would bring a certain event in the sky, but this event is 1,000 years away. When the Messiah would be activated in the descendant of the child, he would father in his old age at the scene of the rituals, even though it probably is not even necessary to have it at this to father a child at the scene of the rituals. But let's say he is a man who likes to go the extra mile. But in 1,000 years, there were many descendants. Many children were born with the recorded words. None of them were affected. This is why we love to speak about words. Here we go again and talk about words. This is something I want you to think about deeply. So I'm going to even repeat this just for you to think about it. In 1,000 years, there were many descendants. Many children were born with the recorded words inside of them. None of them were affected by any triggers. None of them saw the difference in a passing comment. But the one that heard his grandmother singing a certain ancient song, and this song gave him a feeling and insight into the past. He imagined things, found they were real, but thought maybe he was just a genius and these were his own ideas. He felt he was different. For he can for how can you know the unknowable, He knew the unknowable. He saw the memories of the great old man. The great old man of 1,000 years ago was God in him and father to him by blood. The God that lived in him, possessing him, but he did not know. He had the passion to speak the integrities and he knew them without being taught. He had within him a God who knew him before he was born, even before he entered his mother's uterus. So he was certain that he was inspired by God. He might want to be free from this passion because of taboo or such delights, but he cannot detach. It was like for all of his soul. God gave him a burden to carry, he thought. This, my friend, is a God spell, and we have done it many times. We have called upon our ancestors. We have called upon our descendants. We have seen the future and we know the past. These are the wisdoms that we speak and also the wisdom of the Christian gospel, which is used for adverse effects. That mind science used for evil is sorcery. I believe that this is much. There are too many points to ponder. So let me go my way and I will see you in part 4. Peace out.